We meet again here for day 87 of the Daily Bread Bible Study, Thursday, March 26th, 2020, 1 Samuel 17 through 18. Today we will see God's blessing upon David instead of Saul, which even leads to giants being defeated. So in 1 Samuel 17, we have one of the most famous stories about David when he is younger and considered a boy. We see him fighting a giant, the infamous David versus Goliath story. And there came out from the camp of the Philistines a champion named Goliath of Gath, whose height was 6 cubits and a span. I haven't researched what exactly that measurement would be, but needless to say, they thought he was very tall. 1 Samuel 17, 8 through 9 says, "He stood and shouted to the ranks of Israel, 'Why have you come out to draw up for battle? Am I not a Philistine, and are you not servants of Saul? Choose a man for yourself, and let him come down to me. And if he is able to fight with me and kill me, then we will be your servants. But if I prevail against him and kill him, then you shall be our servants and serve us.'" They were afraid, and no Israelite was willing to have battle with this giant. So they continue to have their fights, no truce, and the taunting goes on between them for 40 days. Jesse the Bethlehemite has his 3 oldest sons fighting for Israel and sends his youngest son, David, to check in on them. And while there, the boy hears the giant and sees his people cower in fear. David says, "Who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God?" David's words are heard by the king, who calls the boy. 1 Samuel 17:32 says, "David said to Saul, 'Let no one's heart fail because of him. Your servant will go and fight with this Philistine.'" Saul doubts, but then hears David's confidence. "The Lord who saved me from the paw of the lion and from the paw of the bear will save me from the hand of this Philistine." So Saul gives David blessing to fight. David is fitted on with the armor and with on the helmet of Saul, and a sword is strapped with him. And yet David says, "No, this is not what I'm used to. This is too awkward. I can't fight in this." So he removes his armor, removes the helmet, takes away the sword, and picks up 5 stones from the wadi, from the riverbank, dried up riverbank there. Takes those 5 stones and takes his sling, and he goes to face the giant with just the minimal amount that is needed. Now we have to face giants in our day and time. Right now in our society, we are facing a giant that has been never before seen. Here in the new coronavirus, as it is called, COVID-19, is what we are labeling it as. In our society, our whole world is joined in this pandemic of seeing this giant that we are in some sense afraid of. But this is an opportunity for us as people of faith to show that we trust in the Lord and that we are not going to do things which are rash or silly, to not go out and put ourselves in unnecessary harm's way. But we are also called to be strategic and to stand up and to do what is necessary, to fight the battle that we can fight. And if it's something as simple as listening to God telling us to just rest, to stay at home, to enjoy the sunshine that is outside, but to be physically distant from the people that we are called to be close with, our neighbors, just for a time period, then that is our giant to fight, and that is our way to have battle. And confidence in God means refraining from doing any sort of outstanding activities around with our neighbors at this moment in time. So I hope that God will give you the courage to do what you are called to normally do, to go to the grocery store. If you need to, turn off the taunting that you might hear on the news if it's making you anxious. Know that you are not alone. It's okay to be afraid. People throughout God's history have been afraid. It's just we're called to put one foot in front of the other and just follow the steps where God leads us. So getting back to our story for today, we see that David confronts a giant in full armor, picking it up in 1 Samuel 17:42 through 43. When the Philistine looked and saw David, he disdained him, for he was only a youth, ruddy and handsome in appearance. The Philistine said to David, "Am I a dog that you have come to me with sticks?" And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. But David said to the Philistine, "You have come to me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This very day the Lord will deliver you into my hand, and I will strike you down and cut off your head. And I will give the dead bodies of the Philistine army this very day to the birds of the air and to the wild animals of the earth, so that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel, and that all the assembly may know that the Lord does not save by sword or spear. For the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into our hand." So what does David do? He puts his hand in his bag in verse 49, took out a stone, slung it, and struck the Philistine on the forehead. And the stone sank into the forehead, and he, the giant, fell face down on the ground. Now with their champion dead, the Philistines fled, and the people began to take a strong interest in David from this point in time. David, the mighty warrior, the one who trusts in the Lord, even facing giants and adversity, is able to overcome it. And as we will see, overcome pretty much any challenge that he has when he follows God. In 1 Samuel 18, verse 1, it says, "When David had finished speaking to Saul, the soul of Jonathan was bound to the soul of David, and Jonathan loved him as his own soul. And Saul took him that day and would not let him return to his father's house." Because Saul felt it. He understood that David was special, even blessed by God. He saw how his own son Jonathan fell in love with this David. And he let David lead his army, and the Israelites had success wherever he went. Israel even sang songs about David, and his renown grew. Thus Saul eyed David from that day on, as it says in 1 Samuel 18:9. In verse 12, we hear, "Saul was afraid of David, because the Lord was with him, but had departed from Saul." Saul is having some mental health challenges, especially due to the evil spirit sent by God. So Saul is feeling lost, abandoned by God, and looking and being envious of David, who he sees that God's Spirit is working mightily with. So Saul decides that he tries to attack David. But after trying to attack David, Saul hopes the blessed of God will be killed by the Philistines. So Saul thought, in verse 17, "I will not raise my hand against him. Let the Philistines deal with him instead." Saul wants to outwardly honor him while plotting to control him. And King Saul tries to marry David into his family to keep him close. David responds with humility, saying, "Who am I that I should receive such honor? It is no small thing to be the king's son-in-law." When David asks what King Saul would require as a marriage offering, Saul tells him to go kill 100 enemies, which David does without issue. King Saul then gets David as his son-in-law, yet this only makes him more jealous, as it says in 1 Samuel 18:28 through 29. But when Saul realized that the Lord was with David and that Saul's daughter Michal loved him, Saul was still more afraid of David. So Saul was David's enemy from that time forward. We need each other. We need each other to support one another, to be able to listen to God and hear God's words, and be encouraged that we may not always be like David and be willing to fight the giants that come to us, but hear that God will be with us and that God will give us victory over any enemy that we face if our motives are true and pure in following after God's heart. So thank you for joining me for this Daily Bread Bible study. I hope it's comforting to you, and I look forward to hearing more of what the Bible has to say for us tomorrow.